He goes, I was just thinking about, what we need to do for your comeback. And I was kind of like almost offended. Like, man, I almost got paralyzed. And you're asking me to, you know, get ready to come back into the ring.
He makes me sick might sound like just another wrestling insult, but with Steve Austin, some grudges ran so deep that they followed people for years. Stone Cold was one of the biggest stars the business has ever seen. He helped change wrestling forever, and nobody can take that away from him. Yet behind the curtain, there was a colder side to the man. The story we want to start with did not even happen in a ring. It happened on a podcast in 2015, long after Austin had stopped wrestling. A joke went too far, a phone call was made, and a beloved legend lost more than his pride. And if this story already has you picking a side, use the hype feature and give this video some hype, because Austin's coldest grudges only get darker from here. For now, just hold that thought. A podcast joke turning into a real business problem tells you something important. It tells you that Austin's anger did not fade when the bell stopped ringing. It tells you that, even retired, he still had the power to end things for people he felt had crossed him. We will come back to that podcast soon. But first, we need to understand the man, because to understand his grudges, you have to understand what he was protecting. Steve Austin became the face of a huge shift in wrestling. His character did not respect bosses, rules, or authority of any kind. He drank beer, he flipped people off, and he gave his employer the finger on live television. Fans loved it. They had never seen anything like him. He helped turn the company into a global force, and for a few short years, he was the most popular wrestler on the planet. That is not opinion, that is history. But the man behind Stone Cold was not the same as the wild rebel on screen. His real name was Stephen James Williams, and Stephen James Williams was careful. He was careful with his body, he was careful with his money, he was careful with his image, and most of all, he was careful with the Stone Cold brand. That brand was worth a fortune, and he guarded it like a man guarding gold. In this era, drawing power meant creative power. The more tickets and shirts you sold, the more say you had backstage. Austin sold more than almost anyone. So when Austin spoke, the bosses listened. And when Austin decided he did not want to work with someone, that person's path often closed for good. He called all of this business. Other people felt it as punishment. That is the heart of this story. Austin saw himself as a man protecting what he had built. The people he froze out saw a man who never forgave, never forgot, and never let go. The truth probably sits somewhere in the middle. But the more you look at his grudges, the more you see one cold habit repeating again and again. Once Austin felt crossed, the door was almost always shut. Think about what that protection really meant. To protect his body, he had to decide who was safe to trust in the ring. To protect his money, he had to decide who was good for the brand and who was not. To protect his image, he had to decide whose words and actions he could allow near his name. In each case, Austin was the judge. He held the power, and he used it. For the wrestler on the other side, there was no appeal. If Austin decided you were a risk, your hopes could end with a single phone call. That is a lot of power for one man to hold, and Austin held it without flinching. There is a fine line between protecting yourself and punishing others, and Austin walked right along that line for years. Sometimes, he was clearly in the right. Sometimes, the people he froze out had only made a small mistake, but the outcome was often the same: a cold silence, a closed door, and a career left to drift. As we count these grudges down, watch how often a fair point led to a cruel result. That gap between a reason and a result is where the darker side of Stone Cold lives. So let us count them down. 10 wrestlers who got on the wrong side of Stone Cold. 10 men he could not or would not forgive. We will start high and work our way down to the one that hurt the most. We begin at number 10 with the man from that podcast. Number 10 is Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper was one of the most loved characters wrestling ever produced. He was loud, funny, and clever on the microphone, and fans adored him for decades. By 2015, both he and Austin had long retired from the ring. They were legends living off their names and their stories. They were not rivals anymore. They were two old hands from the same world. That is what makes this one sting. Piper hosted his own podcast on a network called Podcast One. Austin hosted a show on the very same network. So they were not just old colleagues, they were business neighbors, sharing the same platform. On one episode of his show, Piper brought on a comedian called Will Sasso. Sasso did an impression of Austin, and the impression was not gentle. During the show, the jokes turned personal. They poked at Austin's past. They made fun of his old domestic abuse case with his former wife, Deborah. They mocked the way he had walked out on the company more than once. They joked about his ties to the people who ran the business. These were not light digs at his wrestling. They were jokes about the most sensitive parts of his life. There was something else too. The episode was advertised in a way that made it sound like the real Steve Austin might appear as a guest, jest. He did not. He had nothing to do with it. To Austin, that felt like a trick that used his name to pull in listeners. He saw it as a deception that could harm his reputation. Austin did not laugh it off. He picked up the phone and called the president of Podcast One directly. He complained, and he complained hard. The network acted fast. The episode was pulled. Just like that, Piper's show was censored over jokes told on his own program. Piper was furious. He felt silenced. He took the full, uncut episode and posted it for free on another site for anyone to hear. Then he told the world that Austin had got him fired. From his side, an old friend had used his power to shut him up. It did not stop there. Around the same time, the company moved away from Piper's Legends deal. That deal had given him merchandise and on-screen appearances. The timing was hard to ignore. The business chose to protect its golden relationship with Austin, and Piper was the one left out in the cold. Sadly, Piper passed away not long after, in July 2015, with the bad feeling between them never fully healed. Now think about the framing. Austin had a fair point. The jokes were cruel and personal. The fake advert was unfair. He had every right to be upset. But look at what he did with that anger. He did not just call Piper and sort it out man to man. He went straight to the top and made the whole thing vanish. And a legend lost his deals in the fallout. This is the modern proof. Austin's grudges did not stay inside the ropes. Years after retirement, his image was still something he would burn bridges to protect. That sets the tone for everything else on this list. Now let us drop down to number 9. Number 9 is Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn looked like a star. He was tall, he was strong, and he had the body of a leading man. The company saw all of that and tried to push him to the top. In 1999, he won the King of the Ring tournament, which was meant to be a stepping stone to bigger things. They gave him a new singles run and a brash new character, hoping he would become a main event name. It did not work out. A big part of that was The Rock. On a Sunday night show, The Rock cut a series of sharp, funny promos that tore Billy Gunn apart. The Rock told the crowd, in his own clever way, that everyone thought Gunn simply was not good enough. The jokes stuck, the fans laughed along, and Gunn's serious push lost all its steam almost overnight. But the crowd was not the only problem for Billy Gunn. Backstage, Austin felt the same way many top stars did. He thought Gunn was limited. He believed that, for all his size and look, Gunn struggled to deliver strong, believable matches when the lights were brightest. In the high-pressure spots near the top of the card, Austin did not trust him to carry the load. That alone might have meant a cold professional distance. But there was more, and this is the part that really set Austin off. Years later, Gunn and his tag team partner, Road Dogg, spoke in interviews about the Stone Cold Stunner. The Stunner was Austin's finishing move, and one of the most famous moves in the whole business. The pair suggested that they deserved the real credit for making it so popular. They argued that their big, dramatic bumps and the way they sold the move were what made fans love it so much. To Austin, this was the wrong thing to say to the wrong man. He took pride in his rough, realistic, brawling style. He believed his character and his work were why the Stunner caught fire. Hearing two men claim a share of that credit felt like an insult. It felt arrogant. It felt like they were chipping away at something he had built with his own sweat. So the gap between them grew wider and stayed that way. There was no big fight, no famous backstage row. There did not need to be. Austin simply held that cold distance, the same way he always did. And the lesson here is sharp. Even selling his finisher the right way was not enough. The moment someone tried to take a piece of the Stone Cold machine, even a small piece, Austin pulled away for good. His pride in his own popularity left no room for sharing. It is worth pausing on how small this slight really was. Gunn did not injure Austin. He did not insult his family or threaten his money. He simply claimed a share of credit for a move. To most people, that would barely register. To Austin, it was enough to keep a man at arm's length for good. That tells you how tightly he held the Stone Cold name. Anything tied to it, even the smallest piece, was his alone. He had built it, and he would not let anyone chip away at the story of how it was built. That brings us to number 8. Number 8 is Steve Williams, the man known as Dr. Death. This grudge starts with a strange twist of names. Austin's real name, remember, was Stephen James Williams. But there was already a famous wrestler called Steve Williams in the business. That man went by Dr. Death. He was known across the world as one of the toughest, hardest men in the sport. He was a legitimate brawler with a fearsome name. Because of him, young Stephen Stephen James Williams, could not use his own name. Promoters made him take a new one to avoid confusion. That is how he became Steve Austin in the first place. He did not love the change at the time, so before these two men ever clashed, their names were already tangled together. One Steve Williams had to give up his name because the other Steve Williams already owned it. Years later, their paths crossed again inside the company. In the summer of 1998, a writer came up with a wild idea called the Brawl for All. It was a real fighting tournament, not a scripted match. The wrestlers would actually punch and grapple for real, and the winner would earn true toughness in the eyes of the fans. The plan was for Dr. Death to win it. He was the favorite, backed strongly by the head of talent relations. The idea was to build him up as a real hard man, then send him into a big money feud with Austin. On paper, it sounded smart. A legitimate tough guy, proven in a real fight, stepping up to challenge the top star. But real fighting does not follow a script. In the second round, a mid-card tag wrestler called Bart Gunn knocked Dr. Death out cold. Williams also tore his hamstring in the process. In a few short, brutal moments, his whole aura of being unbeatable was gone. The tournament itself was a disaster for the company. It cost a fortune to run, with payouts climbing into huge numbers, and it brought almost nothing back. Worse, it broke the very man it was meant to build. And Austin, who had always doubted the whole idea, now had all the reason he needed. His logic was cold and simple. If a mid-card tag wrestler like Bart Gunn could knock Dr. Death out in a real fight, then Dr. Death was no threat at all. How could fans believe this man could challenge Stone Cold when they had just watched him get flattened on live television? In Austin's eyes, the value was gone. One bad night had wiped it all away, so Austin refused to work with him. The big money feud, the whole reason for the tournament, was scrapped for good. Dr. Death's run with the company never recovered. In here you see Austin's hard edge in full. A long career and a feared name meant nothing once the magic was broken. Austin did not care about the years of toughness behind the man. He cared only about what fans believed right now. And right now, they had seen Dr. Death fall. That was enough for Austin to close the door. Now we reach number 7. Number 7 is Scott Hall. Scott Hall was a gifted performer and a huge name. He had helped change the business as part of a famous group of rule breakers. So when he returned to the company in early 2002, it should have been a special moment. He was booked to face Austin at the biggest show of the year. On paper, it was a dream match between two stars from different worlds. It did not turn out that way. Hall was going through a very hard time in his personal life. He was battling serious struggles and was in poor shape, both in body and mind. Everyone close to the situation could see it. He was not the same performer he had once been, and a match at the top of the card asks for everything a man has. The build to the match and the match itself both suffered. The bout was short, lasting less than 10 minutes. It leaned heavily on outside help, with Hall's friend Kevin Nash getting involved to prop the whole thing up. To Austin, it felt like Hall was simply coasting. He felt that Hall was not ready to perform at the elite level the moment demanded. This landed even harder because of where Austin was in his own life. He was deep in his own frustration. He was unhappy with the creative direction of the company. He was also living with serious neck pain that never really left him. For a man in that state, every big match mattered. A spot at the top of the biggest show was precious. It was a premium payday and a rare chance to shine. So when the match fell flat, Austin took it personally. He felt the whole thing had been wasted. A huge stage, a famous opponent, and it amounted to a short, messy fight that relied on interference. To Austin, that was money and a moment thrown away. He blamed Hall for how poorly it had gone. Hall was let go by the company soon after. The relationship between the two men stayed sour. Now, you can understand Austin's side. He wanted a great match. He wanted his opponent ready and sharp. Those are fair things to want, but look closer and you see that same lack of patience. Hall was a man clearly fighting his own demons. He needed help, not judgment. Austin saw only a partner who had failed his private test. There was no room for mercy. Once Hall let him down in the ring, the warmth was gone. And that is the sad part of this one. Hall was not careless. He was not lazy. He was a man struggling badly with his own life, and it showed in his work. A kinder view might have offered him patience and support. Austin offered neither. To him, the match was the only thing that counted, and the match had failed. He did not seem to ask why Hall had fallen short. He only saw that he had. In Austin's world, your reasons did not matter once the result was poor. The standard was the standard, and Hall had missed it. That leads us to number 6. Number 6 is Mark Mero. This grudge is one of the coldest because it was almost pure business. There was no botched move, no cruel joke, and no real fight gone wrong. There was only money and credibility, and Austin valued both above almost everything. In 1996, Mark Mero signed a strong contract with the company. It came with a guaranteed payment that was higher than what many respected veterans were earning. meeting. Word of that deal spread through the locker room, and it caused real resentment. Austin was one of those who felt it. At that time, he was working himself to the bone to become the top draw in the whole company. To see a newer man handed such a rich deal did not sit well. But money alone was not what broke Mero. The real damage came from a storyline with his own wife. Mero was paired on screen with his real-life wife, Sable. As the weeks went by, Sable became very popular. In fact, she became more popular than Mero himself. The crowd cheered for her, not him. Sensing this, the creative team booked a moment where Sable hit Mero with a powerbomb, a move where she lifted and dropped him on his back. It got a big reaction. Fans loved seeing Sable shine. But for Mero, it was career poison. He had just been physically dominated on television by a much smaller woman, and Austin saw it happen. Right after that broadcast, Austin acted. He called the boss directly. His argument was sharp and clear. He said that if Mero had just been powerbombed and beaten by a small female manager, then Mero no longer looked like a serious threat. How could fans take him seriously as a top challenger after that? In Austin's view, the credibility was gone, so Austin refused to work a major title program with him. He said that doing so would hurt his own standing and weaken the value of his championship run. With that one phone call, Mero's hopes at the top fell apart. His big chance was over, and his run with the company never recovered. Number 5 is Ahmed Johnson. This one is heavy, and it must be told with care. Ahmed Johnson arrived in the company in late 1995, around the same time as Austin. He was a powerhouse, big and strong, and he was pushed hard and fast, but he quickly rubbed many of his fellow wrestlers the wrong way. His in-ring style was stiff, meaning his moves often hurt his opponents for real, and his manner backstage was seen as difficult. That friction was bad enough on its own, but the real break came from a serious accusation. Johnson publicly claimed that Austin held racial bias against him. He said that, from the way Austin treated him backstage, he came to believe Austin was racist. It is important to be clear here. This was an allegation made by Johnson. It was not proven. Austin denied it firmly. So did others. A respected commentator who knew them both denied it, and so did many veterans in the locker room. They all rejected the claim and stood against it. We are not stating it as fact. We are telling you what Johnson alleged and how strongly Austin and others pushed back. What we can look at is how Austin responded. He was deeply offended. He guarded his public image and his personal honor very closely, and this accusation struck right at both. He did not brush it aside. In later interviews, Austin openly admitted that he strongly disliked Johnson. The two men kept apart. They avoided each other in the locker room. They avoided each other in the bookings. There was no working relationship, and no personal one either. It was a complete freeze. Of all the grudges on this list, this is one of the most bitter. There was no path back. The accusation cut too deep on one side, and the offense cut too deep on the other. And while Austin had every right to defend his name, the result was the same as always. He shut Johnson out fully, in his heart and in his work. Once the line was crossed, that was the end. For Austin, there was no talking it through, and no slow road to peace. The door simply closed and stayed closed. That brings us to number 4. Number 4 is Shawn Michaels. By the late 1990s, Shawn Michaels was one of the most talented men in the entire business. He led a popular group on screen, and backstage, he was part of a powerful circle of friends who held real influence. But Michaels also had a reputation. Many found him hard to deal with. He could be unprofessional. His attitude rubbed people the wrong way, and Austin was one of those people. A huge moment was coming. At the biggest show of 1998, Michaels was set to lose the top championship to Austin. This was meant to be the official launch of a brand new era, with Austin as its face. It was one of the most important nights in the company's history. Everything was riding on it, going smoothly. But Michaels was falling apart. He was carrying a serious back injury from a match earlier that year. He was also fighting heavy personal struggles. As the big night drew near, the mood backstage grew tense. Whispers spread that Michaels might refuse to lose the title. Some even feared he might not show up at all. With so much at stake, that fear was very real. The situation got so tense that another huge star stepped in. The Undertaker reportedly sat backstage near the entrance, taping up his fists. The message was clear. If Michaels did not do the right thing and lose to Austin as planned, there would be trouble waiting for him. That is how worried people were that Michaels might blow up the whole night. In the end, Michaels behaved. He went out, he wrestled, and he dropped the title to Austin as he was supposed to. The new era began, but Austin was still not happy. He did not like how the match came together. He was not pleased with its quality, and he had little time for Michaels' attitude through the whole build. After that, the two men barely had a relationship for years. The The cold distance stretched on and on. They only made peace much later, when Michaels returned to the company in 2002 as a changed man. By then, a lot of time had passed. Now, you can see Austin's point. Michaels was a real risk on a vital night. Trusting him was hard, and Austin had reason to be wary. But look at the pattern again. Even after Michaels did the job and lost the title, Austin still held a grudge. Doing the right thing in the ring was not enough to earn his warmth. For Austin, respect seemed to mean total control, and anything less left a mark that lasted years. Now we reach number 3. Number 3 is Hulk Hogan. If Billy Gunn was about pride and Mero was about money, this one was about power. Hulk Hogan was the biggest name the business had ever known before Austin came along. He was a political giant backstage, a man used to getting his way, and Austin would not bow to him. The bad blood started years earlier in a rival company. Back then, Austin was a rising mid-card talent, sharp and athletic, with a different ring name. He was doing strong work and building himself up. Then Hogan arrived at that company in 1994, and everything shifted. Hogan brought huge political power with him. He looked after his own circle of older veterans first. Younger, hungrier workers like Austin were pushed aside to make room. Austin felt that shove. He felt marginalized, left out while the old guard took the top spots. It left a bitter taste. Later, when Austin moved on to another promotion, he did not hide it. He mocked Hogan in his promos, taking digs at the very man who had crowded him out. The story came full circle years later. Hogan returned to Austin's company in 2002 with a famous group of villains. The company saw a giant opportunity. They wanted to book Stone Cold against Hulk Hogan at the biggest show of the year. It was a true dream match. Two icons from two eras, the kind of clash fans talk about for life. It never happened. Both men refused to lose to the other. Neither would do the job. There was deep, old distrust between them, and too much pride on both sides. On top of that, Austin had his own worries about the match itself. He believed their styles would clash badly. He did not think the bout would meet his high standards, and he refused to be just another opponent for Hogan to stand across from. He would not play that role, so the dream died. Instead, Hogan faced The Rock in a famous match that fans loved, while Austin was placed in a shorter match lower down against Scott Hall, the one we spoke about earlier. The two icons never shared that ring. Here is the twist that makes this so telling. On screen, Austin was the great rebel who hated politics and stood against the powerful. But in this story, Austin played politics too. He protected his own spot. He guarded his own value. He refused to risk his standing for the good of the show. By doing so, he denied fans one of the biggest dream matches ever imagined. The anti-politics hero used the same political game he claimed to hate. The two men did patch things up later in life, but that dream match was gone forever. That leaves just 2. We are down to number 2. Number 2 is Jeff Jarrett. This grudge had 2 parts, and both cut deep. The first was about money. The second was about Austin's biggest payday of all. Together, they made for a freeze that lasted for years. The roots go back to Austin's early days in a small regional promotion in Memphis, run by Jeff Jarrett's father. Money was tight for young wrestlers there. Austin remembered opening a tiny pay packet in the locker room and feeling crushed by how little it held. As he sat there, dejected, a young Jeff Jarrett walked past and made a cutting remark. He told Austin that staring at it was not going to make it any bigger, then strolled away. That stung. Austin carried it for a decade. He came to see the Jarrett family as harsh promoters who made young talents scrape by on next to nothing while the family lived more comfortably. It was the kind of small, sharp memory that a proud man does not let go of, and Austin was nothing if not proud. The old grudge exploded in October 1997. Jarrett returned to the big company and wanted to make himself a hated villain fast. So he cut a promo, written with the help of a creative writer, that took aim at the hottest thing in wrestling. That hot thing was Austin's own catchphrase and merchandise, the famous Austin 316. Jarrett went on live television and called the Austin 316 gimmick blasphemous. He accused Austin of ripping off the Bible to put money in his own pocket. And here is the key part. Jarrett added that line without telling Austin first. He did not clear it. He just said it, on air, for everyone to hear. Austin was absolutely furious. And it was not only about pride. At that very moment, the Austin 316 shirt was becoming the best-selling item in the whole business. It was a goldmine. Austin feared that calling it blasphemous on television could spark a wave of anger from religious viewers. He worried that this backlash could harm his momentum and damage his biggest source of income. To him, Jarrett had just put his money in danger for a cheap promo line. When Jarrett came backstage, Austin was waiting. He confronted him face to face. By accounts, Austin's bald head turned blood red red with rage as he let Jarrett have it, holding nothing back. The bad blood was now set in stone. The price came in 1999. The creative team pitched a top championship program between the two men. It would have lifted Jarrett to the main event, the highest level in the company, but Austin flatly refused to work with him. He would not do it. And because Austin's word carried so much weight, that was the end of it. Jarrett's rise was capped. Soon after, Jarrett left for a rival company, his big chance at that level gone. The freeze lasted a very long time. The two men only made peace many years later, in 2022, on Austin's own show. Think about what that means. A locker room comment from years before and a promo line on television were enough to make Austin block a man's career at the top level. This was not just hurt feelings, it was money, pride, and control all rolled into one. Austin did not forget, and for a very long time, he did not forgive. And now we reach the top of the list. The grudge that hurt the most. Number 1 is Owen Hart. This one is the heaviest of them all, and it must be handled with respect. There is no mockery here, only sadness. Owen Hart was a gifted and beloved wrestler from a famous wrestling family. He was known as a kind man and a brilliant talent. What happened between him and Austin was a tragedy, not a feud built on spite. It began at a major show in 1997, in a match for a championship. During the bout, Owen Hart went for a move called the Tombstone Piledriver. It is a move where one man holds the other upside down and drops to his knees. It must be done with great care, because the danger is huge. On this night, something went wrong. Owen dropped Austin straight onto his head. The result was severe. Austin suffered a bruised spinal cord. For a few terrifying moments, he was paralyzed. He could not move. He was lying in the middle of the ring, in front of a packed crowd, unable to feel his own body. It was one of the most frightening things that can happen to a wrestler. What happened next shows just how tough Austin was. Even in that state, he knew the match had to end. He managed to crawl across the mat and pull Owen into a weak roll-up to win, just as the script called for. He got the victory through sheer will, his body barely working, but the damage was done and it was permanent. That injury changed everything. It hurt his neck and spine in ways that never fully healed. It haunted the rest of his career. In the end, it helped force him into an early retirement in 2003. The biggest star in the business had his time at the top cut short, in part because of that one bad landing. Injuries happen in wrestling. Every man who steps in the ring knows the risk. So the break between Austin and Owen was not really about the botched move itself. It was about what came after. In this business, there is an unwritten rule. If you injure a colleague, you show deep regret. You reach out again and again. You stay close through the recovery, and you keep saying sorry. By the accounts of those who knew them, Owen did not do enough of that. It is said he reached out only once, on the night it happened, and little after that. Now, many believe Owen was simply crushed by shame. He had nearly paralyzed the company's top star, a man he respected. He may have found it too painful to face. That is a gentle and very human reason. But Austin did not read it that way. He took the silence as a lack of respect. He saw it as a lack of care for what he had been through, and so the distance grew between them, and it never closed. Sadly, Owen Hart died in 1999 in a separate accident, with the rift still open. By some reports, Austin's resentment ran so deep that he did not attend Owen's funeral. This is where you must weigh both sides with an honest heart. Austin had every right to be hurt. He had been paralyzed in that ring. His career and his health were never the same. Anger was natural. Pain was natural. No one could blame him for being shaken. But the question this list keeps asking returns one final time. Should that pain have hardened into a freeze that lasted until the day Owen died? Was there no room, in all those months, for one act of forgiveness? We cannot know what was truly in Austin's heart, but the result speaks for itself. Even in grief, the door stayed shut. That is the full list. 10 men, 10 grudges, and one cold pattern running through them all. Austin did not lash out in wild anger. He simply removed people from his world and kept them out. That calm, lasting kind of grudge is in many ways harder than a loud one. A shouting match ends. A quiet freeze can last a lifetime. You could also say each grudge taught the locker room a lesson. Cross Austin once, and you saw what it cost. Hurt his body, and you were gone. Threaten his money, and you were gone. Touch his name, and you were gone. Over time, people learned where the lines were. In that way, his grudges did more than settle old scores. They warned everyone else to stay in line. Whether Austin meant it that way or not, the message landed all the same. There is a hard truth in all of this. Austin did not just survive the brutal politics of wrestling, he mastered them. He became one of the most powerful men in the business. And in doing so, he became something he once seemed to fight against. The great rebel who hated authority ended up holding more authority than almost anyone. The man who flipped off the bosses became a man whose word could end careers. That is the cold edge behind the legend. But let us end where we should. Austin's greatness is not in question. None of these grudges erase what he did. He changed wrestling. He pulled millions of new fans to the business. He gave the world a character so good that people still talk about him today, long after his last match. He earned every bit of his place at the top, and he earned it by never backing down. That, in the end, is the whole story in one line. Steve Austin became Stone Cold because he never backed down. He fought for his body, his money, and his name with everything he had, and that fire made him a legend. But behind the curtain, that same fire could harden into a grudge that lasted for years. The very strength that made him great was also the thing that made him almost impossible to cross. And perhaps that is the real price of becoming untouchable. To stay on top, you have to be willing to close the door. You have to be willing to lose friends to keep your place. And once Steve Austin closed that door, it rarely opened again. That was his strength and his cost, all in one.